is not that impressed with our announcement skills as pastors, so we want to invite you guys to rotate and do that. So you're more than welcome. The less you have to see me, the better, maybe. I'm so glad to be here today. Really, we're starting a really cool and exciting kind of section. We're going to go through the book of Hebrews together. So this is going to take us about 8 or 10 weeks. So for the next couple of months, we're going to be in the book of Hebrews looking at it. I'm really excited because we've slated 5 of our pastors will be speaking through different parts of this book. So you're going to hear different perspectives and different guys talking about this. So it's going to be really exciting, all coming from the book of Hebrews. And I have the privilege and honor of being able to introduce this book to you and speak on the first chapter today. And so that's what we're going to be covering. So if you have your Bibles, you can bring them on. We don't turn to our Bibles because there's not going to be a lot of flipping around. It's going to be stay in them. But of course, if you don't, it'll always be on the overhead here. First of all, let me give you a touch of background information for the book of Hebrews before we jump into it. You've got it. This book is sort of interesting in the New Testament. It is one of the books that we're not certain who the author is. So scholars have speculated the author is either Paul or Barnabas, and those are the two strongest. A couple other options are a guy named Apollos, and actually a female named Priscilla is a possibility, and then maybe they don't make sure to name her because girls didn't really write books at that time. So those are a couple of the ideas. I think the best support leans towards either Barnabas or Paul as the author because both of them were considered apostles. In order to be able to make it into the Bible, as part of the actual Bible, the books that were written had to have a link to an apostle, and both Barnabas and Paul are considered apostles. And so my sort of lean is towards Paul or Barnabas as the author of that. But again, only God knows who did this or who wrote this book. The book is titled Hebrews, and aptly so. It is a very Hebrew or Jewishy book. This is probably the most Jewishy book in the New Testament. Jewishy, that's a new word, yeah. Tweet that one. It'll have extensive quotes for the Old Testament in it, lots of Jewish thought and themes throughout the book. The nice part for us is because I know a lot of us, we don't spend tons of time studying our Old Testament, and so if they're quoting something, you don't know where it's from. But most of your Bibles, unless you bought the $3.99 Bible, if you spend over $12 on the Bible, then within the margin, it'll tell you what passage it's quoting. So you can always look that up if you have no idea what they're talking about. Go ahead and look that back up. And if you're using your iPhone or your iPad, there'll always be a little letter or a number by the end of the verse, and then you just hold that down, and then it pops up where that's from, and you can check it out. Because this book really is leans heavily on the Old Testament in terms of bringing themes and thoughts to it. Now, you don't have to be familiar with the Old Testament to be able to understand it. It is written in Queen's English here. I mean, it was actually written in Greek, but it's now translated into English, and it will make sense for you. But just have that in mind. That's why it's quoting the Old Testament so much, because it's super Jewishy. So this book was written most likely to Jewish believers who had become Christians. Now, all of the early believers were Christians. It wasn't for 10 or 15 years, at least, before there started to be non-Jewish people entering into the church. And so here we have the book of Hebrews. Okay, I'm going to give away the entire sermon right away. So ready? The sermon is this. Jesus is better than the rest. That's it. That's the main point today. So Jesus is better than all the rest. That's what we're going to see in the entire chapter. So, that's good. Go ahead and read that on your own. Turn it over, that's pretty much the main point. I think that you'll be able to get that as we read through it. There'll be a couple of side notes on angels, some things we see about angels, but those are really side notes that are interesting things, but aren't the primary point. The primary point today, if you can't get out of here with knowing this, then I've done a poor job, is that Jesus is better than all the rest. Okay, let's check out the verses here. It starts at Hebrews chapter 1 and 1, of course. In the past, God spoke to our ancestors through the prophets at many times and in various ways. But in these last days, he's spoken to us by his Son. So the Old Testament people, they got prophets. But the New Testament people, they get Jesus. So in the past, God would pick a guy, and God would tell that guy, hey, go tell them something, and then that guy would tell them God's word. But what happens with the New Testament, Jesus comes. So Jesus says, instead of telling a guy to go do that, I'm going to actually come. God becomes Jesus. So Jesus is God. We're going to see this play back and forth throughout today. Jesus is God, and then Jesus is going to speak to us. So the Old Testament, they had a problem. They're pretty good. But the New Testament, we got Jesus. And we're going to see throughout the scripture here today that Jesus is God. So we're going to look at this Trinity stuff. It's going to mess around a little bit. So we believe in one God who exists eternally as three persons, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Now, how does that work out? I don't know. I can't explain it, but I'm so glad there's things about God that I can't explain. Otherwise, he wouldn't be very big, right? He's more complicated than I am, and so there are stuff that I even don't understand about him. But we're going to see this play, that Jesus is God, yet he's the Son of the Father, so this kind of stuff. And we're going to see this at work. But today, right here at the beginning, we see that now, in our time, we have Jesus speaking rather than just prophets. Okay, it continues on. So spoken to us by the Son, whom he appointed heir of all things, and through whom also he made the universe. The Son is the radiance of God's glory, the exact representation of his being, sustaining all things by his powerful word. And after he had provided purifications from sin, he sat down at the right hand of the Majesty in heaven. So he became much superior to the angels, as the name he has inherited is superior to theirs. So he says some cool stuff, that Jesus is the exact representation of God. He's the radiance of God's glory, yet he sits on the right hand of the Majesty. So we're trying to picture this. So Jesus sits at the right hand of the Majesty. Majesty is another name for Father. So we see Jesus and the Father aren't the same. Yet we're going to see in a verse or two that Jesus is God and the Father is God, but we don't have three gods. We only have one God. Now, how does that work? Again, I'm going to confess I don't know. Something cool about this first part, my son Andrew would really like this. Andrew, as he's been learning English, as you guys know, he's been here 2.5 years. He's been learning English, and something that he can't really master is when a sentence ends. And so he was writing a 5-paragraph essay, and he had 5 paragraphs, and there were 5 periods total, one after each paragraph. And so his sentence was, then this guy did this, and he also went over, and following that there was including this kind of thing. And so he's got this run-on sentence. And so I think he might be Hebrew, my son. I'm not positive, but perhaps he's a descendant of the author of Hebrews, because this whole thing you're looking at in Hebrews 1 through 4 here, or when you're looking on the board here, that whole thing, though we've divided up in English, in Greek, it is one sentence. It is an Andrew sentence, this one right here. And so it is one humongous sentence. But the really cool part about this is it talks about in the past, all the way to the Son part. He's spoken us to the Son, and then it's got a comma in English. Well, in the Greek sense, Son is the subject, and everything else is subjected to that. Everything else is a supporting statement or a subordinate clause. I know that's over Grammarly for you, but what we're saying is, it goes like this: Jesus, and then it says, under Jesus, he's God's Son, he's the heir of all things, he's the creator of the universe, he's the radiance of God's glory, the exact representation, he's sustaining all things, he purifies things, he sits at the right hand in the position of glory. And so we have Jesus as this thing and then all these criteria, boom, 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 of how amazing he is. Looking at some of that, he's the heir of all things. So in the future, he is the heir of all of this in the future. And in the past, it says he's the creator of the universe. And then you think, well, I thought God created. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, right? Again, we say, yes. Genesis 1:1 says God created the heavens and the earth. Hebrews says Jesus created the heavens and the earth. Jesus is God. So he did that in the past. In the future, he's got something. He's the radiance of God's glory. This part, the exact representation of God's substance or his being. In Greek, this is the hypostasis. So there was this long debate. They used to have all these major debates about what this meant. But Jesus is the exact representation of the substance or the being of God. So Jesus is the exact same thing, representation of what God is. Yet he's different than the Father, but we don't have 3 gods. We have one God. And so, got all Greek translation on here, sorry. He sustains all things. That means he's currently involved. He's past involved, he's future involved, and he's currently involved. He purifies us from sin, sits at this exalted position. So I'm looking at this and I see bottom line. Jesus is the bomb, like bottom line. That's it. Maybe you're from the 70s, so Jesus is far out, Or if you're any 80s kids, Jesus is rad. That works. Nowadays they say like Jesus is beast. I don't know what that means, but I don't even use that. I was going to say Jesus is swag, but that sounds even whack. I didn't say that because sometimes I say words like that just to mess with my kids, My parents, you didn't know they do it on purpose, but we totally do. I'll be like, hey son, that's beast.
Oh my God.
Knuckles. And then they're like, oh, God, I hate you, Dad. And that's at school in front of his friends, you know. I got this swag right here. Don't you think this is swaggy? And he's like, Dad. See, bummer when you go to school that your dad teaches that, right? Sucker. And so now that I use peace, I don't use that. But you know, in the 20s, they would have said, Jesus is Darb. Dick told me that because he was around back in the 20s. Yeah, Ted, did you guys use that one? Darb? Back in the 20s? No, not quite. I had to look that up. I don't know anything from the 20s, you know. And so I just want to spend time just looking at this passage because Jesus, he's so amazing. Like Jesus is worth all this. And then we kind of glance through this, but I want to look back at it. And the first thing that I see is he's the maker of the universe. And in case you didn't know about me, when I was really little, maybe 4, 5, 6 years old, I wanted to be an astronaut when I grew up. And I kept that dream all the way till it was shattered when I was 18. And so I really wanted to be an astronaut. So whenever I see universe or stars or sky stuff, I get like all whoa, like super awesome. And so I latched on immediately to this, that Jesus is the creator of the universe. And so when we think of the stars in the sky and the universe, Jesus says, I did that. And so we're going to check something out because the universe is pretty sweet. So would you look at this with me?
Since the universe is a big place, we could easily get lost. So we'll need signposts to give us a sense of scale. The acrobat's ring is 1 meter wide. The crowd is 10 times wider, 10 meters across, larger by 1 power of 10. Now, with every step, every ring, we travel 10 times farther from Venice, and our view of the universe is 10 times wider. The 100-meter ring surrounds St. Mark's, and 1,000 meters, 1 kilometer, the city center. As our speed increases, 4 steps, 4 powers of 10, reveal all the islands of Venice, the Adriatic Sea, and the mainland of northern Italy. Six steps take in Europe from central Germany across Italy to the Balkans. And soon we can see the entire planet, our home in space. Eight steps on our outward journey, 8 powers of 10, and we pass the farthest reaches of human travel, the moon. If we visualize the paths that the 9 planets take in their orbits around the sun, at 13 steps from St. Mark's Square, the entire solar system comes into view. And with 15 steps, 15 powers of 10, we can see that our sun is just another star. From here on, our voyage will be measured in light years, the distance light travels in an entire year. Only now do we fly past our nearest neighbor stars, almost 5 light years away. The same journey at the speed of today's spacecraft would last 100,000 years. As we cross the perpetual night, our voyage takes us up and out of our sun's neighborhood, near the edge of a great pinwheel of stars. Way is actually a spiral galaxy, and our own sun is just one with 100 billion stars in it. At this immense scale, 23 powers of 10, each shining light we see is not a star, but an entire galaxy, composed of countless stars. Astronomers have discovered that the galaxies are flying away from one another. The universe is expanding. Our own galaxy and all the others form clusters and superclusters of stupendous size, hundreds of millions of light years across. And here, about 15 billion light years from Venice, we approach the outer limits of the visible universe. What lies beyond this cosmic horizon, we cannot see and do not know.
Ooh, that's a big place. And Jesus says in a spoken word, I did that. Light. The entire universe is created. Then he says, I sustain life. And life is really cool. I look at you see baby animals on YouTube and stuff like little thing. Life is cool. Little tiny organisms, they're cool. DNA is cool. The singer and the actual DNA in your body, they're really cool. That life and the tiny little life is amazing. It is so crazy. And Jesus says, I did that. And then it says it's got this immensity of the universe, and then it's got life, and then it's got you. It says that Jesus takes sinners, you and I, and purifies them. Again, that's all Jesus. Remember that video? Like that video, we're tempted to think man, I am so tiny. Why would Jesus care at all about me? Aren't you tempted to think that? I'm just this little person on this planet, and then that planet was, our star was a billion stars, and that was a little tiny galaxy, and the galaxies were tiny, and the solar system, and it was oh crap, I am so tiny. How could God possibly care about me? That's what you're tempted to think. But I'll tell you, because God is infinite, because Jesus is infinite, tiny is irrelevant. Everything is tiny to Jesus. The Bible says that Jesus can hold the universe in the palm of his hand, metaphorically. So everything is tiny to him, and yet nothing is tiny to him. Because he's infinite size, it doesn't matter how big or small something is. And yet Jesus says you matter because he says you matter. You don't matter because you're big or small. Big or smallness is all sort of relative. We are very small compared to the universe, but we are very big compared to a molecule. And so it's not relevant. Jesus says, the tiniest is tiny to me, but I'm bigger than all the tiny, but I'm smaller than all the tiny. Jesus is in and understands every single molecule. And so all that to say, you matter, not because of your size in the universe, but you matter because God says you matter. And this is really cool that Jesus came to save you and me. Isn't that crazy that he came? One of the things he does is he purifies us. Created the universe, pretty big, and yet he cares enough to purify every single one of us. That's Jesus. And he's placed in a position of glory, again, Jesus. So as we look at this and we sort of think through it, and how do we respond to that? You got to respond to this by saying, Jesus, you are awesome. Jesus, you are better than the rest. Jesus, we just marvel at you. You blow our mind. And we remember how amazing Jesus is, supreme over all things, worthy of honor and glory. And so that's how this starts out. He says, Jesus is better than all the rest. All these kind of things, he said, I did that. The universe, the purification of sins, the righteous, all that is me. Continues on to say this, for which of the angels did God ever say, you are my son, today I've become your father? Or again, I will be his father and he will be my son. So now we're switching into the Old Testament quotation of some Psalms. And the point of this Psalm was that David would reign over nations. And then Jesus is the fulfillment of this, where he's becoming the son in order to reign over all of the nations. So Jesus is fulfilling that. And we do notice here that the angels are not sons of God. Angels are created beings by God, but they are not his children, as we are called sons and daughters of God. And Jesus is called the Son of God. But angels are not in that category. They are not sons. They are just created. And so, but in what sense did Jesus become the Son of God when he was born. Now, we don't think that Jesus came into existence at that point. Jesus has existed eternally. So he has been in very nature God, the being of God eternally. And so what seems to have happened is he takes the position, or he takes on a second nature, and that nature is of sonship. I was trying to think of like how to explain this, and I was thinking about the day that Andrew became our son. He was already 11 years old when we went to traveled to China. We met him. We got to spend the evening with him, and then the next day we had to go back to the consulate office or whatever it was, and we had to sign agreement of adoption papers, and he actually had to sign agreement of adoption papers. And so I sort of think it like that. I didn't create Andrew. He existed prior to me. But the moment that we signed those papers, my wife and I, he became our son. And so his position sort of came. He became a Tomsic at that point. Like it or not, sorry, buddy. And so he became a Tomsic at that point. Now, he existed prior to that. And so I think that that's the sort of sonship that we have in mind. Jesus existed prior, but the moment that he came onto the earth, he added a new nature of the sonship of God as well. And so he took on humanity and positionally became the son. And again, it says in Hebrews chapter verse 6, and again, when God brings his firstborn into the world, he says, let all the angels worship him. So side note here on our angels, we see that angels have and do worship God. They have the ability to, and they can, and they do worship Jesus. And so here we see the angels worshiping Jesus and God commanding them to. Now, if you'll remember your Old Testament, you think of the Old Testament where God forbid anyone to worship anything other than himself. So no idols, no false gods, nothing else, only worship to him. And so by Jesus accepting worship of himself, and by Jesus being told by God that he should be worshipped, we again see that Jesus is God, so that Jesus is worthy of that worship. Because otherwise it wouldn't have been allowed in the Bible. And so here we see it being allowed of Jesus because Jesus is God. Moving on, verse 7. In speaking of the angels, he, this is God, I put it in parentheses for you, that's not in the Bible, that part, but the antecedent to the pronoun is God. So in speaking of the angels, God says, he makes his angel spirits and his servants flames of fire. And about the Son, God says this, your throne, O God, will last forever and ever. A scepter of justice will be the scepter of your kingdom. You have loved righteousness and hated wickedness. Therefore, God, your God, has set you above your companions by anointing you with the oil of joy. So here we see a contrast between Jesus, the Son, who is vastly superior to the angels, and even superior to mankind, who he's put over as well. And one part that is really crazy in here, you see, about the Son, God says this about Jesus. He says, you, O God, your throne will be established. So God is calling Jesus God. Isn't that weird? So God's calling Jesus God. So we see that Jesus is God. Yeah, you don't want to think that we have three gods. It's not like God is separate from Jesus. So is Jesus calling himself God? That's sort of weird. And so as you try to think about that, it may blow your mind. But that's okay. It's okay that I don't understand everything about the Trinity. I am so glad that God is more complex than I can understand. If I could understand everything about God, God would be really lame because my brain is really lame. Right? If I could wrap my mind around God, yep, I got him. I understand everything about him. Then he's pretty small. God is not simple. God is complex. And so even more complex. We are complex, and God is even more complex than that. And so here we see Jesus being called God by God. And then also in here we see he's royal, that his throne lasts forever and ever. One of the things I really like in this section is that you have loved righteousness and hated wickedness. That's a characteristic of who Jesus is and how he rules. And I really like this because, when God tells us like to hate wickedness or to love righteousness, it's not because he's trying to give us a bunch of rules. God isn't trying to train a bunch of monkeys to jump through hoops or seals to bounce balls on their head. That's not why God tells us things in the Bible. God doesn't give us ideas for how to live rightly because he just wants to see us perform. You see, Jesus tells us stuff because he wants you to avoid wickedness because it's not good. And he wants you to live righteously and rightly because it's better for you and because that's who he is. Just like I want my kids to be like me. I want my kids to have a great life and have a woman that they love, with my boys, and my daughter have a man that she loves. And I want them to serve God with all their heart. And I want them to be blessed. And so I want them to be a little bit like me. Then Jesus is that same way. He says, I'm righteous. I don't get involved with that wickedness stuff. I am completely righteous and I rule righteously, and I want you guys to join me in that. Not because here are the right things to do, follow these rules, perform, monkey, perform, but because he says that's who I am. And I want you to be like me. I want you to live rightly. And so we see that about Jesus' reign. The character of Jesus as a ruler is a love of righteousness and a hatred of wickedness. Moving forward, he says, God also says this, in the beginning, Lord, you laid the foundation of the earth, and the heavens are the work of your hands. They are going to perish, but you will remain. They will all wear out like garments. You'll roll them up like a robe, like a garment. They're going to be changed. But you will remain the same, and your years will never end. So here again, we see God calling him Lord. Tells us that Jesus laid the foundations of the earth. And you think about Genesis, and it says that God did that. And again, yes, Jesus is God. And so we're seeing that Jesus, he's better than all of the rest. All things in this universe are going to fade away. See, when Adam and Eve sinned, they broke perfection. They messed this place up. But what happens is God is going to not only perfect our souls, he's going to perfect our bodies. And then he's going to take this broken world and he's going to fix it. But he's going to renew it. The old world is going to go away, and God's just going to create a new place for us to live. It records that in Revelation chapter 21, where it talks about God creating a new heaven and a new earth, so where we will remain, and that's where we're going to live and hang out and be with God and that sort of stuff. So the Bible here is saying, Jesus, even though this world and this universe is going to pass away and be recreated and be changed out into something new and amazing, you don't. You stay steady throughout all of it. And so Jesus is worthy of worship because his reign is eternal. It doesn't change over. There's not a new king. There's not a transfer of government power, nothing like this, but rather Jesus remains supreme for all eternity. And finishing up our passage here, it says, to which of the angels did God ever say, sit at my right hand until I make you your enemies a footstool of your feet? Are not all the angels ministering spirits sent to serve those who will inherit salvation? So, side note on angels, again, angels are ministering spirits sent to serve mankind. They are created beings, just like your puppy is a created puppy for you to pet, your cow is created for you to eat, that kind of thing. Or unless you're Korean, then they're both created for you to eat. Well, my wife ate a dog, so it's not stereotyping. She actually ate a dog when she was in Korea, so don't say, oh yeah, that's true. Okay, so it's not racist, it's actuality. Go to Korea, And angels are created by God to serve mankind. It doesn't mean they're not important or something else. They're just created beings. So note to you, you do not become an angel when you die. No chubby naked babies with arrows and hearts or whatever. That is not what happens. You don't get wings and live on a cloud with a harp. You are not going to become an angel when you die. You are going to be you. When you die, you will still be you. In eternity, you'll still be you. You don't get out of this. In case you were hoping, like, yes, I'm going to become like the hot angel. You thought that you were going to be that one. Nope. When you die, you're going to be you. That's it. You're stuck here. So if you're one of those like, oh, I don't like myself people, bummer, because you never get to escape. You will always be you. So what if you kill myself? Well, your soul lives. What if I don't believe in Jesus? Well, your soul lives separately from God. So it's not a matter of your soul ever dying. Your soul lives forever, ever. You'll either be with God or separate from God, whatever you choose. He lets you choose. But you will not escape you no matter what. So you might as well start liking yourself. So, I think about this for me, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm kind of annoying even to my own self, but I guess I'm stuck, so let's work with what we got, buddy. And so you might as well start liking yourself, because that's who you are forever. You don't get to switch and become an angel. When you die, you stay a human being. And then our recreated earth, that's where we'll live back, our perfected body and perfected soul, boom, all back together to live on this, whatever new planet is that we're going to live on. And so, we don't become angels. And so Jesus is superior to angels, just like we are superior to angels. And the last part says, those who follow Jesus will inherit salvation, victory over evil, the enemy, and death. And this amazing promise that Jesus says, look, I am so superior over everything. My reign will rule forever. And yet you are going to inherit salvation. You are right there, sitting there. You're available Salvation is available for you. That you can inherit that. All of this that Jesus has, he says it can be yours too. I want to invite you into that because I love you and I care about you and I think that you're important. And so Jesus says to that, with this assurance, what possibly on this planet can bring us down? I know that we have struggles with, maybe you struggle with school and work, if it's going to pay your bills, and if you're who you're going to marry, or if you're going to get married, or if you're married, why did you marry them, or what is happening, or whatever, you're kind of worrying about. We worry about our families, and we worry about our futures, and we think we get all this kind of tied up inside, and we stress about like if we're going to get our classes even, or if our car is going to run tomorrow. But when you think about it, and you sort of think about this Jesus who holds the universe in place, that he sustains life, that he created the universe, that he purifies us, that he's reigning forever, it sort of makes some of our stuff a little bit less worrisome, I think. For me, I get caught up in all the little tiny stuff, and if I just pause and say, wait, Jesus, you're amazing. Like, oh, my stupid worries are so lame. Because you are so amazing, Jesus. And so surely life's troubles or pressures pale in comparison to the promise of this inheritance, the promise to be with Jesus. So why worry about that stuff? See, Hebrews 1 tells us Jesus is better than everything. All the angels, all the universe, he created it. He did that. It's all covered. We've learned before that Jesus says he loves you and he'll take care of you. So it's all covered. Don't worry about it. And so we can just sit here and just be in awe of Jesus. That he is better than all the rest. And we get to share in that. Isn't that exciting? I want you guys to take a minute right now and just think about Jesus. And to place him in the place that he belongs. I want you to spend a moment with me just saying, Jesus, you are amazing. Like, we didn't stop and just be like, whoa, Jesus, you're super dope. Or Darb, or whatever you want to use. Take a minute and just, between you and Jesus, you tell him how amazing he is. Now, Jesus, you blow my mind. You're worthy of worship. Jesus, I magnify you. How awesome it is to be purified by you, the maker of this universe.